All right, y'all, we've got a challenge for you in this week's episode of Fueled Wellness and Nutrition. This is a pickup challenge. It may not be a pickup in the way that you might normally be thinking. This is a 7-day pickup challenge, and we are talking about your smartphones, those smart devices.
Yay Networks.
Hear me out. So many of us, we're so tied to these, and you're going to be stunned. You may look at your screen time, but we're going to go deeper into that. How many times do you pick up that smart device? What are you going to first? And what does this challenge look like? We're going to ask you for the next 7 days to be mindful of the pickups of your smartphone and aim for at least a 20% reduction. So whatever your starting point is, there's no judgment. We're going to walk you through how to figure that out, what to look at, kind of understand a little bit more about what might be driving you for that. We're going to talk about why it matters. Why can this be so destructive to us in so many ways, to our psyche, not just our attention span, but also our anxiety, our mood, our social interactions can be so affected by this. We're also going to make it easy for you. We'll tell you again how to find these numbers, how to see where our starting point is. And then we've got some key strategies that we'll be talking through that can make it really easy. And it's not just me. I am joined by an expert on this subject also to help us kind of understand our brains on social media. So I'm joined today by Dr. David Houghton. He is Vice Chair of Neurology at Ochsner Health. So welcome, David.
Thank you, Molly. It's great for me to be here. I'm so excited to be able to talk to your audience about the risks, but also the benefits of digital devices.
So Vice Chair of Neurology with Ochsner Health, that's your official title, but there's so many more titles. There's so much more that you do, which is also largely why I reached out to you to do this podcast with me. So kind of tell us, just the full scope of what you do, because you're MD, you also have your master's in public health.
That's right. And thanks so much for having me here. This is a great opportunity to talk about the use of digital devices and where they sit in our society. I am a neurologist. I also help lead our movement and memory disorders division. So this is taking care of conditions where memory and attention and concentration and language are affected, but also other disorders of particularly an aging patient population like Parkinson's disease. And for about half my time, I also get to work in the digital space at Ochsner, helping lead both our forward-facing episodic telemedicine programs, things that became so popular and so necessary during the pandemic, but that we'd also built over the course of the last couple of decades to try to meet more people, particularly across our Gulf South region, but also our digital medicine programs. These are the chronic disease management programs utilizing things like a smartphone connected to blood pressure cuffs and glucometers to measure blood glucose for patients with diabetes. So we have health teams in the background there, but without these digital devices, the ones today that we're going to talk about, those risks and benefits, we wouldn't be nearly where we are today with being able to manage our own health. And so it's a great topic and an interesting one for us to really dive into today.
It's true. So that's, we're going to be talking a lot about the deep, dark side of what some people would consider for themselves, or maybe for people sometimes it's easier to point the finger at someone else than ourselves. But, a lot of people would think of themselves or someone close to them, gosh, we're addicted to these devices. And so that's largely what we're going to be talking about today. But there are benefits to digital technology, and we don't want to discount that. So the different things that David was talking about of, the digital medicine program, and people can monitor their blood pressure and all these other things that they can sync in real time, so their providers or their health coaches can see these metrics and jump in if they need guidance almost in real time.
Absolutely. It's critical, with a lot of the things that we take care of through our primary care providers and our specialists in the health system. If we are only allowing those doctors and those team members to sort of see how we look in office visits,
right,
we've lost so many days, hours, minutes where we could have really made a huge difference in people. So to be able to check things on the fly and communicate with the technology that we have at our fingertips, think of what could be done on smartwatches like the Apple Watch right now that is syncing with so many of these devices. The future is really boundless on how we can monitor health these ways.
When I asked you, hey, I would love to do a podcast with you of basically our brains on social, I don't think you knew right then that I was going to be asking you to do this challenge personally.
Well, we're going to talk a lot today about the anxiety that comes from people who are picking up their phone too much. And I have to say that my anxiety was never higher when I realized that I was going to have to turn inward and really have to admit to you and to your audience how many times I pick up my own phone every day.
It's really, really wild. So first of all, everyone who's listening, we'll kind of walk you through how to do it. So you can find this number on your phone, whether you have an Android or you have an iPhone. And I'm going to include a link in our show notes. We're doing this on multiple platforms. So we're covering this week. We did it with WGNO with Brooke Laser. She's a meteorologist. She does the segments with me there. And, her pickups in a day were over 200. So I think when we put it there, sorry, Brooke, but I think we all feel better.
She's got me beat, but not by as much as I thought she'd have me beat when I went and looked at my own.
What was yours? Your highest?
So my highest over the last couple of weeks has been around that 140 or 150 times per day. And, when we look at it, we try to figure out what's the reason? Why are we picking it up so much? We're going to talk today about, the anxiety that provokes, or maybe the rewards that are driven by us to check our phone periodically. But it matters. It matters on why we're doing it and what we're doing that first time we pick it up.
So as you said, around
140, 150, sort of in that range.
And that was your average?
That was my average over the last couple of weeks.
My daily average is 60. And I know, but when I first saw it, I was like, oh, wow, 60 times a day. And I felt like that was a lot. And my first thought was, oh, my dad would be disappointed in me. Like, come on, Molly, you and that phone, And I've made changes over the past couple of years that I'll share that have made me more mindful about it. But at first I thought 90 was a lot. When I saw Brooke's over 200, I was like, wow. And that's normal. And what's interesting about Brooke, the meteorologist that I was saying with WGNO, she actively strives to be engaged with whoever is in front of her. She takes pride in the fact that her face is not in her phone all day long, yet she still had that many pickups. And so how to find it, and I'm going to link to the segment that Brooke and I did, which has all of this in great detail. But basically, how do you find your number of pickups? If you have an iPhone, you're going to go to settings, to screen time, scroll down just a little bit. You'll see your total screen time. That's how many hours you're on your phone. What I'll say on that is I don't always judge that, because sometimes that could be a Zoom. It could be a conference call. It can be like work related things. So you'll see your screen time, scroll down from that, and you're going to click see all activity. And then you'll scroll down and you'll see your number of pickups, and it'll let you see this days. It'll also let you see the course of a week average, and it'll let you kind of toggle back and forth last week or the week prior, and you can see your averages. For Android users, I don't have an Android, but I looked it up for y'all. And so what I understand is that you'll go to settings, then digital well-being, and then click on show your data. So with that, when you see your number of pickups, just under that, and I actually hadn't realized this until David pointed it out, you'll see what's the first application on your phone you open after you pick it up.
That's right. And I think it may help explain a little bit how and why people are engaging with their phones the way they are. You'd mentioned Brooks, and she has many contacts on social and ways that she's able to reach her audience. When I looked at mine, far and away, the number one was messages and
text messages.
And so while I'm in particularly the administrative parts of my job, I realized that so often I'm getting those alerts where the text messages are coming up. And as you mentioned, Brooke taking pride in her connection with her audience, I take pride in trying to respond to somebody who has contacted me with a question or a comment as soon as I can. And yet I went back and thought, do I really have to respond as quickly as I do? Are there opportunities to batch them? And the same way that, in the past, people would stay on their email and looking at that all day. Frankly, I don't use my email nearly as much now as I do with my text, because it's ways that people can reach you more quickly and more efficiently. So there's some trade-offs from the efficiencies that we've developed in our own lifestyles, I think.
So when you look on there and you're looking to see, you'll see your total screen time. And what's interesting too is as we talk about number of pickups decreasing, your total screen time likely will decrease. But again, what we're talking about for this challenge is specifically going to be those total pickups. So David's is text messages. That was way far and away
Yep.
your number one. For me, it's about even for text messages and emails. And I'm using that a lot with work. We keep talking about Brooke, the meteorologist with the TV station. She does a lot with social and as part of her job. And so her first was Instagram on there. So it lets you see kind of what's driving your desire to pick up the phone and look at it. And we'll talk strategies in a bit as far as like how to minimize this and how to, it's not just about being more mindful, but there's real tools that we can put into place. But before we do that, we really want to talk about like why it matters, like why and how can this be so damaging? We'll talk anxiety and mood, but anxiety, I don't think a lot of us maybe associate our phones with that. We'll talk about learning and especially memory retention. Y'all, it's a tremendous influence on really almost harming our memory and our ability to retain new information. And then social skills. And we may not see social as much with adults who have that high smartphone use, but we're seeing it a lot with kids. So starting first with anxiety, what is data showing us on this? What are you seeing with this as far as those of us who are just in overuse, some might think, of devices and how this is linked to this?
Yeah, it's a great question. And in the literature, particularly over the last 4 or 5 years, has become much more clear about the correlations with excessive iPhone usage or other smartphone usage that can be measured by the number of pickups like we're talking about today. It may be measured in the amount of screen time, particularly for young adults. And in those studies, it's clear that higher numbers of anxiety disorders, more depression, more social isolation, difficulty with our community being able to deal with problems on a daily basis. Much of that is exacerbated in the patients or the individuals who are using their phones excessively. And what's difficult to measure is this a chicken or the egg story? Mm-hmm. Are the phones an outlet in the utilization of technology, an outlet that is more likely to be used or abused by people who have already existing anxiety disorders? Or for somebody who may have the proclivity for that, is it the final straw that breaks the camel's back where they really may have had some healthier coping skills that then are completely abolished by the fact that their face is in their phone and they're utilizing those quick pickups for whatever purpose to cover something up?
And when we talk about several things there with anxiety, I think the most obvious that comes to mind for a lot of it is the anxiety that can stem especially from social media and sort of this comparison that can happen. And we know objectively that when we scroll through social media, we're not seeing what that real life looks like for someone. We're seeing what they're putting forward and what they may consider as their best foot forward. And even when they're showing them at their raw behind the scenes state, it's still curated, and it's still edited for our viewing. And so there comes, for especially teens, but adults as well, there's so much. It could be envy. It could be a feeling like you're not measuring up. They're so lucky, or I wish I had, there's just so much of that, I think, with social.
I agree. And the pediatric and adolescent literature is full of examples where there are increased rates of body dysmorphic disorder where patients don't understand what normal looks like, and higher rates of eating disorders and other unhealthy coping skills for those exact things that you mentioned, Molly, the comparator analyses that people do, almost not even realizing that they're doing it. Everybody has a little bit of an imposter syndrome. It's natural,
right.
and it's something that when someone is looking to attain a higher level of achievement, it's important for people to feel like they can be pushed, but it needs to be healthy. And if they're looking at things that are unreachable, they're looking at things that are unhealthy, and that's where the internet really becomes a danger. The more that we're picking it up, the more that we're going to our phones is really a risk.
It's also simply the constant stimulation and sensory overload that can be triggering these feelings of anxiety. We're not giving ourselves downtime.
No doubt. And the front part of the brain, which is attached to a neurotransmitter, a chemical called dopamine, is one that lights up whenever patients are utilizing these devices. And we realize that dopamine is an important natural part of our reward systems. But in fact, as it gets into this area called the mesolimbic part of the brain, we are tying rewards to things that are much less tangible. Years ago, before we had these electronic devices, rewards may have been tied to group activities, or may have been tied to in-person friendships, or may have been tied to academic or other athletic accomplishments. And it's not to suggest that those are the only healthy ways that somebody can receive reward. But if now the time that otherwise would be spent doing those things, if you're not on the playing field, if you're not going to the library, if you're not meeting up with friends, and instead you're only on the phone, or you're on the phone too much, we've now changed those pathways in the brain so that our dopaminergic systems are really relying on the technology rather than things in person.
Let's take a minute to talk about GoLee Nutrition, one of our partners for this week's episode. GoLee Nutrition makes it easier than ever to incorporate different supplements, different nutrients that can be specifically beneficial, especially for those who don't love swallowing a capsule or a tablet. They have a variety of different gummies ranging from apple cider vinegar, ashwagandha, kids multi, superfruits, super greens, dreamy sleep, and triple action immune gummies. And here's the thing, unlike many gummy products, GoLee Nutrition actually contains a moderate amount of those key active ingredients and minimal sugar. Also, no artificial sweeteners, flavors, or synthetic colors. They're all vegan, gluten-free, and they're non-GMO. Go to go.golee.com/fueled. That's go.goli.com/fueled. You'll be brought straight to the site with our fueled discount already applied. It's super easy. Again, that's go.golee.com/fueled to make GoLee part of your wellness routine today. Please note, these statements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration, and these products are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. What we're calling the pickup challenge, there's a study that I'll link to in our episode notes. It was in the Journal of World Psychology a couple of years ago, and a report here. And one of the things, so we are calling it a pickup challenge. There's actually a definition for this, or not really a definition, but maybe a little bit more science sounding. So they refer to it as habitual checking behaviors, and characterized by quick but frequent inspections of the device, which is what we're talking about.
Certainly.
So quick but frequent inspections of the device for incoming information from our social or personal contacts or news. And just like you said, this is that reinforcement of the reward centers that are engaging this dopamine system that, like, we normally are going to get that from, like you said, all these group things or exercise, or that rush of the feel good that we might get, or even from things that we may not think are great nutritionally, but we might get that from certain foods or movements and all these other things. This is happening from this pickup. And so the way that I sort of look at when we're just picking up our phones for nothing, and we keep picking on Brooke, and again, sorry, but over 200 times a day when you're just picking your phone up, there's probably, and even you with 140, and I'm, not going to judge myself on my 60 now, but like there's not something new that's going to come up. How many times, and I know I do it, you just looked at your phone and now you're reaching for it again and opening up that screen. There's nothing new there. It's the same thing as like if you're looking in the pantry for that late night snack, and nothing new is going to be there if you haven't gone to the store than what was there 20 minutes ago, but we just stand there and look at it. It's sort of the same thing as going back to that fridge or that pantry over and over.
I totally agree. In fact, there's no more addictive behaviors. This has been recognized by social psychologists for years, that what has been called variable reward systems. And this is variable, meaning that there is really no rhyme or reason on whether or not something new will be there or not.
Right.
It describes why people get addicted to gambling in many circumstances. There's no rhyme or reason on why they're going to hit that jackpot or how they're going to do it, but they know that there's a chance. And so if they think there's a chance, even though it's completely variable, you will have a greater tendency to play more and more and more, hoping you're going to hit that jackpot. It may describe the way I play golf also, by the way.
It's a jackpot of information that might be new or incoming information in our phones. And why do we care at that moment? I was thinking about this, I guess, knowing that you and I were doing this interview today. Last night, as I was going to sleep, why do I decide at night that it's going to be time to check the headlines? Or I'm doing a pass through social at night as I'm putting my phone on the charger, which we'll talk about in a minute because I put that in a separate space away from the bed. And so many of us do it. We have that nighttime scroll before you're going to bed. And I'll look at emails right as I'm like walking up the stairs to go to bed. I'm like, why? Number one, why do I care? And if someone's sending an email right now, they are not looking for a reply. If they needed me immediately, they would just text or call. There's nothing urgent that's going to be coming through at 10 o'clock at night, but why do we look?
Most of our listeners probably have heard of FOMO, fear of missing out.
Right.
This is digital FOMO.
Yeah.
There's a tendency for us to think, well, there may just be one more thing that I missed, or what if that person did respond, or what if that new picture came across on Instagram from my sister or my friend. And so this is really what we've been calling digital FOMO.
It really is, but checking things that are not even exciting. I mean, I'm checking my work email before I go to bed, and even if I saw it, I wouldn't reply to it unless it was urgent. And again, if it's urgent, they're not going to email me at 10 o'clock at night. And it's all that's doing is also putting that last content in my head as I'm falling asleep. And sometimes I have strange dreams that include people from work. And I dream a lot. And sometimes if I wake up, I'm like, I got to go back to bed and get a better story going here. Well,
that bright light at the end of your day too, right into your brain is what's going to keep you awake as well. So that we know that the patterns of sleep behavior are much improved for people who give their brain enough time to rest away from the screens, away from the activities that obviously are going on with you sort of having to curate and sift through the things that you're looking for.
It's crazy to me that we are, and myself included, I am checking sources for new information. As this journal article puts it, that habitual checking behaviors, that quick but frequent inspection of my device, I am doing that for things that maybe aren't even that interesting. It doesn't matter, yet I'm checking it. That repetitive checking too, what we're, calling our pickups or our pickup challenge, that is key and sort of just this integral part in the next thing that we'll be talking about, this, overarching, it'll be called, cognitive issues or affecting our cognition. But what this means is learning, memory, our ability to retain new information, and our focus and attention.
Yeah, I think the other thing that the ease of information gathering that has come through our use of digital devices, again, much of which is valuable and allows us to function at perhaps a higher level at our jobs or even ways to monitor our own health, that also comes with a price. And decades ago, generations ago, we retained a lot more phone numbers, for instance.
Right.
I knew many more phone numbers when I was a teenager, like my two boys are, to be able to remember them rather than the ones that I have now. Now I have hundreds in my phone, but I probably only remember a handful.
The same ones that you knew as a kid.
I can. We can always still say those. And so, part of the consequences for some folks of having the ease of access at our fingertips is it doesn't go through many of the traditional learning processes, things where we make references in the brain, where you understand one topic because of the way that it was correlated and associated with others, where there was emotion attached to it, the way that when in fact you didn't know something, you knew where to find it, and you knew multiple places where you could find it. Right now, the vast majority of us could, if we needed to, find it with that same keystroke on our computer or that same finger flick on our phone. And it requires less cognitive energy to be able to find that information and subsequently make new memories as a result.
And one of the things that we're seeing is, there was an interesting analysis or study that looked at people's use and engagement with information using the internet and using an old-fashioned encyclopedia. And this was fascinating because people who were searching online, they were able to find the information faster than the people who were using like old-fashioned printed encyclopedias, but they didn't have the ability to remember that information accurately later. They knew where to find it, but it wasn't sticking.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And in many circumstances, it's because we are subconsciously or almost accidentally learning more things when we either experience it ourselves, we find the answer ourselves, we hold a conversation with another expert ourselves. Even the location of where we learn things is so critical. There's been a body of literature for years that if you're learning a subject in school sitting in one chair, you will do better on the test if you take the test in that same chair, because of the experiences of learning were much more detailed. I could tell you, speaking of the encyclopedia, I don't have to close my eyes to even think exactly where our world book set as a child in our home was. And I can remember the books that we had above the shelf because every time I went to the encyclopedias, my eyes would scan up there. And so these are all more rich, more deep, and I would argue more emotionally important in many circumstances. Memory that comes from experience, comes from the references that our brain hooks together rather than just that simple sort of factual memory.
Do you think there's something to, there may be a little bit of an argument that, well, the fact that we do have this information so readily at our fingertips, or like we don't have to remember everybody's phone numbers because they are stored in our phones, that is like freeing up cognitive space?
I think there may be some truth to that. I think all of us have sort of felt like we've been on quote unquote overload before. And so it may be that if in a moment of questionable attention or concentration, if you can get a quick answer yourself, it's going to do some degree of offloading. But I think the jury is still out from a neuroscience perspective on whether or not we truly need to save space, if you will. I think the connections that we've recognized in our brain that allows us to go between what's called the mesocortical system. We talked about the mesolimbic system with reward. The mesocortical system is the part that's largely in charge of those initial learnings, attention and concentration, and then gets passed through other connections back further in the brain, not only into the temporal lobe where much short-term memory sits, but then all over the brain to allow multiple connections like multiple card catalogs would do in a library. I think we have plenty of space. I think if ultimately tomorrow, someone decided they were never going to pick up a phone again and they were going to rememorize all the old phone numbers that they had, I don't think we would see a detriment in their memory going forward. In fact, it may show that we're turning on some parts that they haven't been using for a while.
Right, tightening it up and
Absolutely.
Yes, using it in a way that it isn't often.
An effective pruning, if you will.
Right,
Yeah.
right. When I have something that I'm really immersing myself in, notes for this interview, for example, as I'm sitting here with David, I've got several pieces of paper. I printed these out. I stepped away from any technology. I had my highlighter, as you see. I had my pen. I'm making notes, and I put myself in a space that I had only this to focus on. And there was nothing else was near me because I really wanted to wrap my head around it and kind of prepare for this. For me, having that content printed on a paper that I'm holding and marking up, it's almost like it's sinking that content deeper into my brain than if I'm scanning it on the computer.
That's a great point. And it also shows that you have learned that about yourself over decades of your own learning experiences and your own education. Your way of learning works for you. Many others have discovered different ways. There's people who like the sound of white noise. There's people who listen to music when they study. There's people who go for a walk. There's people who are quite visual with their learning. But I would contend that the individual who has discovered their most effective learning style had to do it in an environment and probably in an era where there were fewer of these distractions, mm-hmm. like the 100 and almost 50 mm-hmm. pickups that I myself am having on a daily basis. And so one argument also to be made to be cautious with these number of pickups, these number of usage of devices, is that we are starving ourselves of those other experiences. Mm-hmm. Really figure out how we learn best and how we will continue to be lifelong learners, which we know is so critical for an aging, healthy brain.
So I have several different, journal articles out in front of me, and that was what I was looking through. If I had my phone next to me, and if it had the settings are such that they don't pop up these alerts and make sounds and notifications. However, if it was, and I was trying to read this, that is like a little bit deeper dive into a subject that I really wanted to be able to speak to our listeners cohesively about, if I would have had that constant interruption, it would have completely interrupted my immersion in this. And so when we're talking about those pickups and the number of times we're looking at our phone, that total screen time may not be, may or may not be, depending on where that screen time is coming from. Again, for me, sometimes I am in transit and I have a Zoom, and I may only join that Zoom call by audio because I'm from one place to another, and I arrive at that destination. I just keep it on the smartphone and continue. Well, that might be an hour Zoom, and that's going to count as screen time. Why we're focusing more on the pickups is because that is where our brain is having that reward system for that new information coming through. And what we mean by a pickup is, your phone locks. Most of us have our phone on that setting. And whether it's your fingerprint or thumbprint or your face activation or you're entering your code and you're basically opening up your phone. So every time we're picking up our phone, it doesn't necessarily mean if your phone stays locked and you're simply picking it off the table. That's not what we mean by a pickup. It basically means opening the phone for access. Every time we're doing that, how many times have you thought you're going to pick up your phone to look up something, and then you open your phone and a text message comes through? Oh, David texted me about, And then I reply to that text. Oh, and then I see a notification about a news alert that just came through. Now I can't remember what I picked my phone up to look up.
Right.
And that example, I think we're all like, oh, I do that all the time. On the other aspects, we talked about memory and it's interfering with our ability to retain new information and kind of lay down those new memories and that new content. But our focus, our attention span, our natural ADD, or not natural, but almost creating this ADD.
No, I think you're right. And I agree wholeheartedly with this challenge because it sort of reminds me of something that's active versus passive, right? Someone may have an app open and it may, run up their phone time. I can remember, one of my sons, two boys that are teenagers. They both have cell phones. They both have smart devices. We monitor them. We have the amount of time available, and we can track it on the iPhone. I remember once one of my sons blew through the number, and I said, "What happened?" Well, he fell asleep with a YouTube video on, and the phone didn't shut off. And so his pickup would have been one,
right.
But with hours on board. So there's really an active versus a passive discussion here, and it is that activity that if you've intentionally picked up that phone, if you've intentionally gone to do something else, even for that fleeting moment where you described almost like that digital FOMO, it's going to be very difficult for you to maintain attention, not only with the task that you went to do first, but it's going to distract you from something else that's around you. And I think that distractibility nature of these devices, which is not accidental, right? That we know that the digital content that you and I are producing right now to everything else that we see on our screens is designed to hold attention, even for a short period of time. It means it's going to suck attention away from something else.
Let's take a minute to talk about Bonafide, a sponsor for this week's episode. Bonafide is for women dealing with perimenopausal and menopausal symptoms who want safe and effective non-drug solutions they can trust. Silvessa by Bonafide is the first comprehensive system designed to restore and protect hair and skin affected by estrogen decline from the inside and out. Silvessa delivers 3-way support. It includes a daily capsule, hair serum, and skin serum that work together to support healthier looking hair and skin. Give Bonafide a try today. No hormones, no prescription required. Our listeners receive a special offer by going to hellobonafide.com using promo code FUELED. That's hello, BONAFIDE.com, promo code FUELED to claim your offer up to 54% off when you subscribe to multiple products, including Silvessa. For best prices, free shipping, hellobonafide.com, promo code FUELED. So talk to me about what we're seeing with, looking at focus and attention specifically, but with ADHD. What is it looking like as far as the impact of our smartphone use in that?
Yeah, that's a great question. And the American Academy of Pediatrics, among others, have very clear guidelines on limiting screen time and smartphone usage and other screen usage for children with an age-appropriate allotment as we grow and as our frontal lobes develop. It's still not even until we're in our mid-20s until our frontal lobes, which are in charge of things like attention and concentration, are fully myelinated and are ready to sort of take on the adult world. And so the studies that have been published on this show that there is an uptick in the amount of measures of attention deficit for kids and teenagers that are higher utilizers of the smartphone. I don't know the specific data on pickups here, but I would imagine that you could surmise, because of that being an even greater attention draw, that the detriments will be greater. And I'll say something else, and that is one of the unique features of attention deficit is that there can be hyperfocus in that condition. And we probably have all known people who have ADD or ADHD tendencies. They could then also hyper-focus on one task, whether it be a video game or whether it be playing other games at home. Those games usually are something that there is inherent uniqueness to that is able to maintain their attention. And digital devices, gaming, even short bursts of content on things like TikTok or Instagram are unique in their ability to similarly cause hyperfocus. And so that hyperfocus as part of the ADHD sort of continuum, I think, is something we certainly see more of.
So we've talked first anxiety, and I think anyone, that's with everything over the past few years, I think we're hearing more and more, instances of people who maybe it wasn't something that really plagued them so much before, and now they're struggling with anxiety in ways that they hadn't before. And I'll also, going back to anxiety, say there's so much that we're sort of trying to do to help with this. We want people to know about different resources available. There's so much conversation around mood, anxiety, and some of just the fundamental things that we're doing or not doing can really be at the root of it. So I would encourage you, if you are feeling that you have these feelings of anxiety and you're talking with your physician about it, you're exploring this with your, healthcare providers, and, give this, like, we're kind of jokingly talking about a pickup challenge here, but really give it a try and really see. There's other things we've talked about on this podcast before. Alcohol and our steady and regular use of alcohol can increase our anxiety. Ultra processed foods can increase our anxiety. And smartphone overuse can increase our anxiety. So I think that's really important, that first thing we talked about, like, let's just let that settle in a bit.
And all of those things that you mentioned, of course, get into those reward pathways of the brain, some of them quite fleeting and all of them resulting in some negative behaviors for somebody. But that dopamine, where the dopamine really helps unlock some of those reward systems in the front part of the brain, it's no surprise that that's a common thread between all the things that you mentioned there.
And imagine how many of us are looking for that answer or that solution. I'm struggling with anxiety. I need help with this. And we're often looking externally for that help. It might be meeting with a behavioral therapist, which can be incredibly beneficial. Some people may turn to medications, which in some cases can be beneficial, but we're looking a lot of times for that external support to help guide us through dealing and coping with this anxiety, which those things can be useful, but it's just like anything. What can we also do that can even be like, what's the fundamental kind of core baseline that we are creating for ourselves with these things?
I think that's right. And it all comes down to the health of the behavior surrounding the devices, right? In fact, you'd mentioned seeing a therapist, group therapy, medications. There's actually lots of really impressive and helpful digital content out there. People are utilizing these devices to be able to have virtual visits with their healthcare provider, to be able to take part in behavioral therapy. And in
meditation
fact,
apps.
No doubt about it. And so it has everything to do, I think, with the content that's being accessed and the healthful ways in which that content is being accessed. And that's why I think this pickup challenge is so unique, because it really hits to the intent of someone to continue to check something, perhaps in a way that is without any true goal-seeking behavior behind it, other than just the process itself. That's different from when you're using your phone for your job, when you're using it to call your mother, when you're using it to study for school or to prepare for another project. Exactly right. So it's all about the intent and how we're using it, on whether or not that's in a healthful way or not.
So we talked anxiety. We talked about memory retention. I think these are things that are important to all of us. The third key area that we'll talk about before we get into some of the strategies that I found really helpful, that I'm also going to be asking David to try and our listeners to try. But the third thing is social interactions. And let's just say it, social awkwardness.
I think, part of the time that we have in a wakeful day, and ultimately the time that we all have on this planet, is a little bit of a zero-sum game. If you're not doing one thing, you may be doing something else, but you can't do everything. And I think one of the greatest risks between 3 or 4 or 5 hours of screen time, there's data right now that the average amount of time that someone does spend is between 3 and 4 hours. We'd mentioned the pickups. You were in the 60, I was in the 150. I read something where the average pickup for someone is about 90 times. So you and I are sitting on either side of the average. But combining those together, it means that you're not doing something else. It means that you may be in a situation that is socially isolating. You may not have some of the well-recognized advantages of going for a long walk or getting out and meeting new people or trying new things. And while I think it's difficult in many circumstances to put real quantitative value on that, we can certainly put the qualitative value on that. Stuff just makes people feel good.
I think we all also have had interactions. I think with adults, people in their, 20s, 30s on, especially late 20s, 30s on, technology has not always been in such the forefront of their lives. And so as kids, people who are maybe older adults, saying late 20s and up, they've had the ability to develop their social skills, to develop the way that they're going to interact just normally with people they know well, with people they've never met, they're meeting for the first time. Like conversation and all of this is just something that we've developed a way that this is how we're comfortable in this. For younger people though, talk to us about this because, if all they've known their whole life is technology, how does that affect how they're communicating in the real world?
I think in many circumstances, the verdict is still out on that as well. As we continue to study the types of behaviors of folks that are spending, hours on their phone, as I'd mentioned, they're not having that interaction already, and we know that there is unique value for many patients or for many people, to have that. I will say for some, certainly children, but also adults, there may be unique advantages similarly, right? We all have known people who have never been comfortable in the more traditional social situations that you or I are talking about. We've met people who had difficulty making friendships in a more classic or traditional manner. And in fact, some of these connections on social have become really valuable and I would suggest healthy social outlets. But again, it gets back to the pickup. Mm-hmm. It gets back to whether or not they're utilizing the same way that you would go to meet somebody in a group setting. Right. You wouldn't similarly go, 5 times, 6 times, 10 times an hour to meet somebody in the group setting. So it's really, I think we want to separate out the repetitive behaviors, the checking of the phone, the anxiety that someone's missing something, the worry about what someone else might be thinking about what you posted. I think that's all quite different than just the opportunity perhaps to utilize technology for good. Mm-hmm.
So when I like all of that, you're right. Because I think about, especially maybe someone also who has a physical limitation for whatever, it could be transportation.
That's a terrific example.
They don't have they're physically not able to have the mobility that others have. And so sometimes that can be their social network is such a tremendous part of their lives. And so I think what we're looking at too is, again, the intent, the intentionality of it versus the reactive nature.
Perfect.
Which is what we're going to work on. So when we talk about our pickups, when I first looked at my pickups and, as I was preparing for the WGNO segment and this podcast, I was at 59. And when I told my husband, he said, "Oh, wow, gosh, I knew you were on your phone a lot." And then he looked at his and his was like between 90 and 120 or something. And then
comfortably average.
Right. We talked about yours. We talked about Brooks. Part of the reason I think that mine is lower, while I had not been doing a specific pickup challenge with myself over the past, year or two, a couple of years ago, like deep in COVID, so much of what we were doing, everything we were doing was virtual in some degree. And so things like TV segments, other things that would maybe normally be sort of anxiety provoking live in a studio, I was doing here from a house in the kitchen. And there was a pivotal moment that this happened. And I was doing a live TV interview and I had my phone up on a stand. And this was, I was interacting like it wasn't recorded for later. It was live right then. And I'm trying to engage with the interviewer. And of course it's short and you're trying to think really quickly. There's this, like, even though it was remote, there's still, you get it too, I'm sure. Anytime you're doing live TV, you're sweating a little bit, you just want to make sure it's right. And all these alerts start popping up. It was from a group text. And then one comes and the next comes and the next comes. And I found myself so distracted and I pulled through the interview, but I found myself kind of stumbling over my words. I had these distractions and I had already been thinking, wow, I have so many things that come through my phone. At that moment, I turned off all alerts. No text alerts, no email alerts. There's no ding. There's not even where it pops up. I think they call it a banner. That doesn't even pop up. So my phone doesn't have any change in appearance. If there's a text, a phone call, a calendar, anything.
I need to make that change because so to our listeners, Molly and I looked at and compared ours. Molly, are you going to share how many alerts that you truly had?
You You say yours first.
I will say mine. So mine was, I think today, 150, and my number of pickups today was like around 120. So my argument initially, of course, was that I'm only picking it up when someone's giving me an alert. But Molly made all the changes that she ever needed by, I think you said you had less than 5 or something that popped up all day.
And I was really glad that you had pointed that out to me too. So while I was looking at pickups, David says, look and see what your first application on your phone is that you go to. So there's that, which gives you a little bit more education. And then right below that, it is number of notifications. And this means what is either popping up or dinging or somehow we're getting pinged that something has arrived inside of our phone. And when I made that shift, again, nothing comes through. I have it set so that when my husband texts or calls, it does bypass that and I can hear it and know this. My notifications today was 5.
And I'm glad that means your husband checked on you 5 times, right?
And you're right. And it was up 50% from last week, which I thought was hilarious.
Well, he's trending in the right direction. But I need to make that change because I think, so this is a perfect segue to talk about those strategies. So I think things that we can do to decrease the notifications. I realized as we were talking about this, I've made some of those changes on my computer itself. So I was on Zoom calls in the past and I stopped. I think many of us probably who were on these did the same thing. You can take away your own video. You're still going to show it to others, but you're not looking at yourself. I found that I would have I don't know, I never thought of me as being so narcissistic that I wanted to watch myself the whole time. But I think everybody does it. I think they want to watch, what they look like. And so you take that away and that's one less anxiety provoking moment. I learned how to, on my email and some of the other apps in the background, like Microsoft Teams, to silence them. So while I'm on Zoom, I'm not seeing messages pop up and I'm not seeing email pop up. I need to do the same thing on the phone.
It's so true. And we're talking phones, but I would say on your desktop, that's a big one. If those of you who are, in the work world and you're seeing people who are on Zooms or you see a presentation and someone's sharing a screen and they've got all these notifications popping up, I'm like, oh my gosh. And so I think doing it on our desktop is key, and also doing it on our phones. One thing that I'll have people say is, well, but my kids need to be able to get in touch with me. Just like I did with Brad, you can have any contact that you need can bypass that.
That's brilliant.
And so there is no excuse that, my kids or my husband or this or work. If you have, like you're going to be on call at times. And so if there's certain numbers that are going to be the numbers that come through or whatever that may be, like there's ways that for most issues we could bypass it and give those priority to be able to come through the blockade that we may put.
And I believe there's hours too that you can sort of silence and so you could keep it open during some hours but off during others. I know we're reminded now, we both obviously work in accordance with Auctioner, and there's ways that they tell us, are you sure you don't want to send this email during work hours? It's a good call out by the computer that you're working too late.
You're right. And on that note, for people who are emailing late at night, there's nothing wrong with that. If that, a lot of times, especially people on my team who have kids, things come up during the day and they're catching up on things at night. We're all a big fan of delayed delivery. So this is not talking about the pickup challenge, but find out on your email, everyone's got the access to do it. Delay delivery, there's going to be different ways, but in Outlook, you can click on options and it'll bring you to delay delivery. So if I am happening to work on something late at night, maybe Brad's working or he's out of town and I'm catching up on some things, no one on my team needs to have that email showing up for me at 10 o'clock at night. I don't need that to infiltrate their brains right before they're going to sleep. Delay delivery for 8 a.m. the next day or whatever. So on our phones, looking at how can I strategically turn off or minimize these alerts. Now, you may decide to keep it that certain of them you want it to show up as what they call a banner on there. But for the love of God, these people that have strobe lights or like sirens and like horns going off, my dad has one of those. It almost sounds like it's like an emergency alarm system.
Yeah, that sounds a little bit aggressive for me.
And so,
even my alarm in the morning is softer than that.
Yeah,
Plus,
maybe it's because you can't hear.
I think that may be true.
Go in and you can literally go through all of your apps. So if you're getting notifications from Google News as popping up on your banner, you can go through in your settings, you can go through each of those different apps on your phone and like you can turn off, like when you're in your settings, you can turn off those notifications and you can choose which ones really matter. The thing is, those things are still coming through your phone. The difference is when I'm opening my phone, I'm choosing to look and see what new has come through. is there an email that I need to look at, or a text that has come through, or has this person gotten back to me? I sent this and I'm curious if they did. And it is more intentional, and it has really minimized the pickups.
I'll use this as another endorsement to the unsubscribe function in your email as well. There's nothing more cathartic than spending a few minutes to just unsubscribe multiple times and watch your life get better in your inbox.
You're right. They're just giving yourself that time back. Mindful checking of the phone. So when you don't have those alerts and it's not pinging you that something new has arrived in your phone that, ooh, it's so enticing. Like, what was that? You don't have those alerts. You are making that decision. I also changed it to where, well, let's be honest. I got a new phone and I tried to set up the voice, the face feature, the facial recognition. And for some reason, it didn't do it right. And I thought, well, I need to ask for some help to get that facial recognition. And then I realized I actually like the barrier of having to type in the code. Because
just enough friction to decrease your ability to pick it up.
It's 6 digits. And inevitably I miss one, and then you kind of have to, because you're doing it quickly and you mishit it. And then I'll think, do I really need to look at it? And I really I'll ask myself that, and I'll think no, and I put it back. Or sometimes like, yes, but yeah, not having, considering deactivating the face or the fingerprint or whatever just makes it so easy. So you have a little bit more of a barrier there.
It's great advice.
Is there anything else that's coming to mind that you can do or that we would share with people? Oh, nighttime. We talked about this too.
There are plenty of sleep challenges that many folks have of all ages, particularly as we get older, where the pineal gland in the brain, which is in charge of helping maintain sleep through the release of melatonin, and as well as some other nuclei, including the suprachiasmatic nucleus, these things change as we get older. And so for many of us, as we enter middle age and beyond, we're just not able to get that same easy night's sleep that we used to. Well, one thing that's going to certainly make it worse is to be on the phone, to have that anxiety rise, afraid that we're going to miss something. And simply, as I'd mentioned earlier, the act of having an incredibly bright light directly stimulating our brains is quite problematic for many folks, as well as the different sounds. People sleep with white noise or brown noise or a dark room, et cetera.
What is brown noise?
So honestly, I'm not sure the difference between brown noise and white noise. I have a colleague who insists, actually, this will be the only pickup that we will do this whole time.
He's doing a quick Google search so that we can make sure, because it is a fascinating concept. I also think the fact that we color the concept of noise.
I mean, for her, it's been a remarkable change for her sleep, supposedly. So here we go. White noise encompasses sounds from all over the spectrum, including low, mid-range, and high-frequency notes, but brown noise uses only low-frequency and bass-heavy notes.
Wow, so it's like the baritone of...
The baritone of noise.
Sound.
So my wife and I, we sleep in a almost completely quiet room. Although what's interesting about my wife's sleep patterns is she has to sleep in a much colder environment than I do. So we actually have something called the chili pad. Have you heard of this?
No.
So it is a device that you put on the mattress, and it circulates cold water on the bed. Now, we only have it on her side of the bed because I don't want to be cold at night.
Wow.
But in so doing, she's never had better night's sleep. So it's not noise or a lack thereof in the Houghton household that fixes it. It's temperature. And we need to have Terry's side of the bed be extra cold. So
a public service announcement there for everyone who has thermostat arguments within the household.
That's right. It's fixable, and you can only do half the bed. So I think, all part of this challenge really is how is it going to fit into sort of a new lifestyle for a lot of folks. Right. And if you're already able to cut down on the touches during the day, you're certainly going to be able to cut down on them in the evening hours. And what I would discourage folks from doing, of course, is just trying to shift it. Don't say, okay, I'm not going to use my phone for the next 4 hours, get your number down 20% in so doing, and then fall back on bad habits. Let's see if we can make that real 20% reduction something that has some staying power.
We've been giving Brooke a hard time with WGNO, and I checked in with her, 1 day in, 2 days into her challenge. She's down 40%.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And she was like,
that's a high bar. It's gonna be hard.
No, she, and 60% in some of her metrics and then 40% in others, which she was really, really mindful of it. The thing on sleep that I also would encourage you to do is, just our listeners to do, is to put your phone not by your bed. And, a lot of times we may look at our phone and we use that as our alarm clock, put it away from you. I put ours, the bathroom is like right on the other side of the wall behind my bed. And so I can still use my phone as my alarm clock. But what it means is I'm putting it on that charger in the other room and stepping away from it before I get into bed. And then I'm not having that screen light right before bed. I actually have an old-fashioned book that I might only get 3 pages through because it isn't so stimulating, and then I do actually fall asleep.
Right.
Equally or more importantly, at night, if I go to check the time, I actually can't just pick up my phone. And then for those of us who have the alerts popping up, you see it. And now it's stimulating that. And all of a sudden you have these thoughts going through at 2 o'clock in the morning about what you just saw come through on your phone.
And certainly put it away during meals, and
Right.
for goodness sakes, put it away while driving, and
Right.
keep it in your pocket while you're in other really important moments, whether that's, a meeting at work that you need to maintain your attention for, whether that's an event for one of your kids, or whether that's, just spending some time alone. I think these are really important times to put that phone away.
Those things can feel uncomfortable at first. If we see people at the bus stop waiting with their kids and the parents are the ones on the phone, not the kids, or at the playground. If my husband's been teaching me tennis lately, and we'll be out there at the playground and we see people swinging their kids and the adults are staring at their phone while they're swinging their kids. And so it may feel awkward to have interaction if you've been using the phone to avoid that interaction. And it is a lifestyle shift.
Sure.
But yeah, so give it a try, y'all. So we've got the link to see how many pickups you're currently having. There's zero judgment here. We're kind of giggling at all of our numbers, but there's truly zero judgment. It's just like anything. It's just, what is your starting point? What is your baseline?
We're putting those numbers out there for everybody to hear and see.
And then start to kind of think about, number one, what is your number of pickups? And then educate yourself, as David was saying, what are you going to first? What are you having the most? It'll say, what's your first thing you're going to once you pick up your phone? That's going to be really telling as far as what's driving that pickup behavior. And then also, how many alerts and notifications are you getting? And that might be the next, if you heard us talking about it, you might be like, yeah, whatever. And then you may see, wow, I didn't realize that much was coming through. So those are just that's the first part, to educate ourselves on it, and then start to make these shifts and really just be mindful. And, 20% reduction would mean if it's 150 pickups, let's try to drop it by 30. So let's try to get you to 120. And if you can do more, you can do more. Brooke set the bar high, like you said.
I know, and I'm going to try to get to that 50% reduction just so I could say I beat Brooke.
I'm going to be messaging you to check in and see.
I'll send it to you.
Thank you.
I'll keep it honest.
Thank you so much for doing this with me. I've been really wanting to talk about our brains on technology and especially social, and incorporating this pickup challenge is a fun way to do it.
Great chance to meet with you and with everybody who's listening today. So thanks a lot.
A huge thank you to Dr. Houghton for joining us. It's always fun to do a challenge or talk about a challenge when you've got somebody else joining you to do it, but also with him to kind of hear the science behind this, the science of technology and how it influences our brains, how it influences our anxiety levels, our memory, our retention, and, our social interactions, like all of these. It's not just a neutral, and, in some cases there are some positives, like we said, but a lot of times there's some pretty hefty negatives as it comes to, those areas specifically. For me personally, he and I didn't even get into things like the Apple Watch and stuff like that, but all of these are ways that we are just constantly pinged. And I mentioned that early on, at the very beginning of the pandemic, I made that decision to really turn off all notifications. For me, I think a lot of it is, I feel like my mind easily can stay on overdrive. It may be the running to-do list. It may be ideas that just kind of keep swirling or turning. And some of them are things that I want to marinate on, but we need time to quiet that. We need to be able to turn down the noise, to dial this back. And we need empty time. We need that white space. And I know that I'm not alone, and that sometimes I really struggle with turning my brain off and really turning that down. And so thinking of this pickup challenge as like that volume knob for our minds, our psyches. And so it's more than, it is just a fun challenge, but I really encourage you that as you do this challenge, really pay attention to how you're interacting, how you're being mindful. Is this influencing your attention span, your ability to focus, staying into a certain project maybe longer? And as you give it a try, I want to hear from you. I want to hear how it goes. I'll include links to some of the journal publications that we talked about. I'll also include a link to our WGNO segment that I mentioned has the step-by-steps for how to find your pickups and this other data that we talked about on your smartphones. And again, let me know what you think as you incorporate this, as you try this, enlist a friend, enlist a group of friends to try your own pickup challenge. We're suggesting 7 days. You can do it for even 3 days. I'll be grateful if you do it longer, even better. We're aiming for at least 20%. If you overshoot it like Brooke did, again, even better. So reach out to me. Let me know how it goes. I am registered dietitian Molly Kimball, and you've been listening to Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, the podcast. If you'd like more Fueled Wellness and Nutrition, please head over to mollykimball.com, and you can follow me, Molly Kimball RD, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And if you haven't yet, please go to Apple Podcasts and subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. Join us next week for another dose of Fueled Wellness and Nutrition. Thanks for listening, and stay focused on living your strongest, healthiest life.